Hello, and welcome to the Some Kind of Mystic podcast, the show that bridges all things mystical with the chaotic and unpredictable experience of being authentically human. I'm your host, Jessie Herman, life coach, energy healer, artist, mother, and channel for the non-physical entity group Vagrein. In other words, I'm some kind of mystic, and so are you. Our guest on today's episode, Karissa, is a reality transformation coach. She specifically supports highly sensitive souls who want to deepen their self-awareness and profit from their innate epicness. As an advocate for their limitlessness, she guides global conscious leaders from doubt and mediocrity to creating the reality of their dreams. I've personally known Karissa for over 4 years, and she was one of the key cast members of my personal story towards becoming a channel. For that, I'm forever grateful, and Karissa is someone who's super dear to my heart. Please remember to stay tuned for the end of the episode where Karissa shares with us her fun fact and how she had an opportunity to encounter her own inner beast on television. Please welcome to the Some Kind of Mystic podcast, Karissa Weiskamp. So welcome, Karissa, to the Some Kind of Mystic podcast. I'm so happy you had this possibility to join us and honored to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's really exciting. So now I'll just let my listeners know, you and I have known each other for almost 4 years now. I met you just right after I started channeling, and you were one of the key cheerleaders to get me to really step into this gift. So thank you so much. I'm ever in gratitude to you. And also, you're one of my best friends. So thanks so much for being a part of my life and being part of my journey.
So much love.
Wonderful. So we're here today to talk a little bit about your journey from, let's say, everyday average person. I mean, you've never been average, but regular life, pre-spiritual life, childhood, growing up, and then what happened in your life, what encouraged you towards a journey towards awakening, towards mysticism, towards your gifts, towards stepping into your power. This podcast is all about how we're all spiritual in nature. So will you tell us a little bit about your backstory?
Okay, a little bit about my backstory. Well, this is a really fun time for you to ask me this because I recently just did this sort of past reconciliation, and some people might call this like a soul retrieval. I didn't know what was happening. I was just like, what? And I was looking at pictures of myself on Facebook, and it was this whole thing. But if anyone's like, wait, I'm interested in that, I might be doing a workshop on that later. Who knows? But that's not the point. The interesting part is I have not rehashed like this part of my story since I've done that. So I'm also right along with you. Like, I don't know. We'll find out.
Okay.
So yeah, I'll be with you in the storytelling process. But so as you know, I grew up in like a conservative religious household, and like God was very central to my life. But it wasn't until I was in my early 20s when I had that pivotal like questioning time, and I was already married at 19. And so I was already deep in that culture. Like that was what I lived and breathed for the first 2 decades of my life. So when I was asking a lot of these questions and starting to feel that the difference in dissonance of like, oh, these people in a position of authority are saying one thing, but something feels off. It was right then whenever that inquisitive questioning, like sort of almost like rebellious spirit that wanted to know more and seek to find a deeper meaning, that's what really assisted that transition process. So as many of us have done, I did that whole research and like personal development and like, kind of dived deep into the self-help sphere to understand myself, to have some sort of clue of like who I am, because the whole open identity centers, we are like I'm a chameleon, I don't know who I am, please someone tell me. So it was this process of starting to realize for myself what my own truth was without it being fed to me, but really learning that my body could speak to me, my gut, my womb could speak to me, my heart could. And there was this whole new language, this whole new language of energy. And I jumped into the Kool-Aid with both feet and I was like, energy! Energy is amazing. And that's what my life became about, like for a good solid 5, 6 years, where I started to understand more of what we are at our essence, is how I would describe it.
Hmm. So at that point, you're married, you have this whole life established, and now you have a huge transformation, and you're like, oh, now what? So can you tell us a little bit about what happened there? And because there are a lot of people in that sort of situation where, they're going along and what is expected of them or what they have set up for themselves, through choices that they've made earlier. And then they come to a space where they're like, wow, this isn't me. And also, now I know who I am. So what do I do to match my day-to-day existence with this newfound self? How does that work out? How did that unfold for you?
Yeah. Well, that's a really juicy part because let's see. This looked for me like very much having the American dream, very much having like my life is put together. Like I'm set up from a very early age, not set up from the parental way, but like I set myself up and married into something very safe, secure, and solid. And we were kind of like that power couple for our friends and family, where like we had this incredible relationship that was like the foundation of this incredible life we were building. And that transition point for me really felt like this point. Actually, I was in this meditation retreat, of course, where it was like this voice almost was like knocking on the door. And I realized like I hadn't gotten still enough or quiet enough to recognize how clear that calling was until I put myself in a situation with hundreds of other people who were seeking to find that sort of voice or to find that clarity.
Hmm.
And so it was sort of like this building. For me, it was a building of a grieving process because I was listening to people actually coach others in this process of letting go of their marriage and like their jobs. And I was in my own grieving process, but I was like projecting it onto other things and going like, oh well, no, 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 no. Like that could never be me. I'm I'm in a wonderful relationship. And so I was like in complete denial that that could be mine or for me. Um, and so what's really cool is that I can see it as like that Kinsho and as Satori. So like as that slow unfolding, as Reverend Bernard Beckwith calls it, that slow unfolding, which is a Kinsho, or Satori, which is like this moment of enlightenment, basically like lightning strike. And so for me, I had both. I had like, oh, the grieving process of something greater than me, sort of signaling like, hey, it's time for you to start processing and purifying. And like I was crying and I didn't know why for like half a year. So I was like crying through these things and releasing. And then I also had that moment of like profound insight where I could hear like the truth of my heart going like, there's something far greater in the unknown than what you currently have, which was like you kind of have your life set up for you. Like you have your own businesses, you have everything you could possibly want or dream. And so for me, it was also strangely apparently difficult to let that go because the appearances were like totally illogical to anyone else. And then on the other side, I had such clarity
Mm.
that I could, in full confidence, keep iterating to my closest friends and family, like, I know it's so strange, but I know that I need to do this instead. I need to choose this. And for me, that looked like a separation period and then me moving out of the country completely away from friends and family. And so, yeah, that's what my journey looked like at that moment.
Sure. Sure, sure. And it was almost unstoppable once it began, in a way.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I've heard that story so many times. I mean, different circumstances, but it really is a question of that, like you said, that slow unfolding sometimes of, oh, okay, this is who you are. And you can either choose it or not, but it's
Mhm.
chosen you. You've chosen you
Mhm.
already. So that's really beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. And of
Yeah.
course, there are consequences from that. But would you say now that, like, on the other side of that experience, that it was worth it?
Yeah, like, the way I see it now is that everything sort of builds on itself, and so now I can still say, "Oh, I seem to be in still the prime of my life, but I feel like I've lived hundreds of lives."
Hmm.
I feel and, line 3s are like this, right? But I feel like this entire accordion of like these timelines opened up for me whenever
Hmm.
I thought, oh, I just get this one level, this one line. And that is a gift I didn't know I could give myself, but apparently it's this and more.
Hmm. So tell us, let's say your life before was you were established, you had a home, you had a family, you had your partner, and you were stationary, right? Now I know
Mhm.
that your life is very full of movement and energy in lots of directions. You're in lots of places in the world. Can you tell us a little bit about how you're living your life in a non-local type of way? Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, so I've been doing the slow travel, like expat nomad life since like 2018. And so most recently, I've been slow traveling around the United States. I'm now in Kauai. I've been house sitting, I've been pet sitting, um, I've been staying with friends, making new soul family friends. It's really been incredible to understand that like our mind, I feel like my mind makes up sort of the most logical reasoning on how these things can piece together from A to B. And then I'll go like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I'll allow that, right? From the limited mind. I'll allow that. Okay, I can believe that. But then if I look backwards, it's like, oh, of course I would be needing to meet these people in these areas and these animals even that feel like they are home, feel like they are also family. So I'm still just at the leading edge of this moment where I'm like, I feel I'm continually just being amazed by what's possible while also attempting to practice like non-attachment to, oh, I found something, I found an answer. This is how to do life for me, right?
Right. So you would say, like, or I would say from observing you that you have a very abundant life.
Yeah, oh my goodness. Here, especially it's reflected in Hawaii for me personally, because Kauai itself feels like it's been home for many, many, many lifetimes. It feels like I'm the most grounded here, this in like Glastonbury, England. So I just feel so incredibly blessed that it feels otherworldly, really. It feels like I'm sort of operating in between dimensions here because I'll just look around and I'll see a mountain and I'll see all these trees and I'll see all these pops of color and I'll go like, pinch me, like, am I actually awake right now? And I feel like that's a really good sign to be like, am I sleepwalking? Am I dream walking? And it's such a relief. It's such a relief to feel like the abundance that we've claimed, that I've claimed, and that we've assumed for ourselves like this is what my life's about, creating heaven on earth, that's physically physically being experienced, physically being projected.
Yeah. So, what I would love for you to talk about now is how abundance isn't necessarily financial, because you're living a life where, like, you are maybe staying places for free or finding ways to travel that are not conventional, and of
Yes.
course you have your businesses and your work as well, which we'll get to in a minute. But what you're doing is, like, for so many people feels out of reach, but you're like a living example that it is within reach for those who have faith that it is. So
Mhm.
Can you talk to us about how your journey through sort of like coming out of like the matrix of believing that you need money to do every single thing that you want to in life and you have to work a whole life before you can retire and then travel or whatever it is? I don't know
Mhm.
if that was your specific belief, but that's a belief that a lot of the collective holds. And the other example of what you're living now, which is that you haven't worked for 60 years before you're doing this. And maybe you don't know what's going to be coming up next year for you financially, but you do know that you are going to continue to achieve and have the things that you want in life. So
Mhm.
I feel like that's really a nice space to encourage also our listeners to start to consider opening up their mind to the idea that their dreams are not constrained by a financial price tag.
Oh my gosh, we opened the can of worms. This is my favorite topic. This is
Okay.
my favorite topic. Okay. So, I have talked about this for a while, about the this idea of being infinitely resourced, and I really resonated with this idea that there's multiple forms of abundance, and they can be listed right as trade or gifts or imagination or synchronicity or money itself. So for me, the way that I'm living my life now in comparison to before, and I'm still being amazed every day where there's that conditioning, where those old beliefs of like A plus B equals C and
Mhm.
linearity and all of that. Like I'm still amazed every day that I get to unlock like new levels of the game and go like, oh my god, oh my god, this frustration was all in my mind yet again. What a surprise! So right now, I would say it seems pretty miraculous to some people that I have the level of trust or level of confidence in my future or in my ability to adapt. And I would say that that's something that comes from practice and building that momentum and that trust in yourself that you have your back. It also comes from a lot of different experiences of knowing like, hey, if I'm craving, let's say, something that used to be a comfort food, like that I could easily or comfort anything, I could keep within my reach if I could not cope with life or triggers. It's almost been like for me a blessing to at times not have the money to
Mm.
procure those things so that I could grow through that. And I started to realize all the things that really deeply nourish me are actually free. Surprise. For
That's a
me, that
great
yeah.
point. Yeah.
Yeah, like the most incredible thing for me is my time outdoors and appreciating nature, appreciating that the sun can fill me up, blah blah blah. Uh, I can just listen to the sound of the birds, and I'm using these different senses and these sensual cues to remind me of the abundance that I am, to reconnect myself with that ever living fountain of life that brings me back into presence where I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm breaking continuity, I'm breaking linearity, and I'm coming back into this place of like, oh, I'm everything. I'm the source of it all. And then my dreams or the next level like thing I'm manifesting, then it doesn't seem so far away because there's this really beautiful quote like when you can do more with less, then you will be given more.
Mm.
So I really got into this appreciation for enjoying the simple things, to be honest. And I actually started to enjoy not having so much physical money in my life because it really allowed me to gamify my life and actually interact with more people and understand like, wow, there's a whole world beyond me making money, my God, and then asking it for permission to live the life of my dreams. And once I hit this number, then I feel good and safe about setting off on that trip around the world.
Right. So, and you don't need that safety anymore because you know that, again, the resources are all there and available to you, whether you have that target number or not. And I love what you said about like having less and getting more because a lot of people, I feel like the situation that they get themselves into is they accumulate what is wealth or considered wealth traditionally. Then they come to like the space where they have like stuff.
right? So like they have a house that they're committed to, they have a couch they're committed to, and you can't just up and leave these things because then you've got to get, a house sitter, and you've got to get like you end up with almost creating problems for yourself with owning stuff. And there are seasons in life where that's important, it might not be feasible for everyone to sort of go like, okay, I'm going to be moving around all the time. But I imagine that the fact that you, again, like you said, you're forced a little bit to have less in some ways,
Mhm.
but that does give you more freedom. And people sometimes think it's the other way around because they believe like, okay, if I have more money, I have more freedom. But the truth is, as much as you have, you also end up having responsibilities to that, whatever it is, that money or that object or that thing. And I personally am in a phase of like, okay, I got to get everything out of my house. And I go through this in cycles, and I'm like, oh my gosh, if I could just have like a fairy come in and tell me like everything that's not necessary, just take it all out, because it really is a problem of where do you bring this stuff responsibly? Even if you want to donate, sometimes that's difficult, or if you want to, sell something, or if you want to like make sure you're disposing of things in a responsible manner, these are
Yeah.
difficult and time consuming things to do. So I
Yeah.
do have an envy for you for like having whatever amount of stuff that you have that you're living with and using every day and appreciating every day, as opposed to sort of like a excess of things that aren't necessarily allowing you that freedom. Because I do feel sometimes trapped by my belongings, to tell you the truth. It's not good. Um, but I love that you were talking about like how the sun is a source of nourishment and how the birds are a source of nourishment. And I know that a lot of your work is related to sensing and sensuality. And so I'd love to invite you to talk about that part of your work and how, I mean, I've always seen you as this being who is very in touch with the pleasure aspects of human existence. And because humanity is so in touch already with the quote suffering aspects, what you
Mhm.
offer in terms of re-educating people into allowing and accepting pleasure is so important for the collective. And I know
Mhm.
that that comes also from your own experience as a child of being taught to deny pleasure. So that's an
Mhm.
invitation to you for riffing on that topic.
So the method that I've been trying out lately has been to look at, okay, if I'm in avoidance or if I'm in reaction, that's my stuff, that's my cocoon, and to basically alchemize it by going, what a pleasure. And to actually feel the greatest thing I could be doing right now, the most important thing I could be doing right now is to address this, alchemize it, bring light to it, and actually mean like what a pleasure to sit with this, what an honor. And this came kind of full circle a bit ago when I was like, oh yeah, messenger of the light, like this is making a lot of sense, like as an alchemist. So to answer your question about like what does I do in my work, I actually just was talking with a client today who in the span of 26 hours since we last spoke, she ended up leaving a partnership that felt completely like unhealthy for her. She moved out and moved into a new place in the span of 26 hours, and we actually went back and microscoped like in we increased like our awareness, like what shifted there. And my interpretation was that moment where I asked her, all right, this version of you that you want to become, that we're, putting out into the future saying, this is who I want to be, this best version of me. You know, when is that possible for you? And we kept moving that up from 6 months down to 2 months. And she's like, yeah, I can see 3 or 2 months. And so what we did together is we just felt into the energy of who is she? Who is that? What does she feel like being that now, right? It's the whole idea of visualizing what it is you want to experience and adopting that as your identity and feeling it right here, right now in your whole body emotionally. And she did that. And so when she texted me the next morning, like, oh my goodness, everything's changed in the best way, I was like, what happened here? So, why the senses are so important to me and why I really prioritize it in my work is that there's typically a reaction, right, to everything. If we are going out of balance, we're going to swing the pendulum, right? So what I find with people who are interested in moving more into their spiritual nature is that maybe there's also an avoidance of something. Maybe there's also like this desire to deny or purify or like move away from something unpreferred. So I
Mhm.
really find it important to acknowledge that our senses, like our body, our animal self, this densest version of us that we know right now, this is an asset because the way I see it, perceiving or creating heaven on earth is something that comes through us as like a vessel, and we are part of the creative process. So I really like to bring people through their different kinds of embodiment practices because in my mind, what else is there? What, like, at the end of the day, what other option can we use? So something that I bring to my clients often is the practice of tapping into heart brain coherence. And so for anybody watching this who are like all about spiritual alignment, this is the way I found to measure. And Dr. Joe Dispenza actually popularized this for me in the Heart Math Institute. And I started to train with the M-Wave tool that tracks your heart rate variability. So if you haven't heard about this, I highly suggest you look into it. There's a couple different forms you could use. But what really amazed me about this is that I could track second by second what my heart rate was doing in response to my thoughts. And I could see where I was efforting to try to adjust my heart rate, like to try to be better, to get a better score. And I even like tried all these tactics, like subtly, like, okay, if I'm grateful, if I have a grateful thought, oh, if I try to effort a really grateful thought, and it would catch it every time, it would call me out on my bullshit. And I'm like, oh no, I can't
Can't trick your
this
heart.
thing.
This thing, it's
I
your
can't
heart.
trick this thing. Yeah, I can't trick this thing with all of my positive thoughts. Like
That's
I
right.
actually have, yeah,
You have to
I
experience
actually
it.
have to feel. I
Mm.
have to feel that like this perfect point. It almost seemed like at that time when I was just tipping back and forth, um, just between reactivity. I just had to get clear, like, wow, I am a lot less stable than I thought I was. I have a lot to learn here
Mhm.
in just connecting my heart to my brain. So I
Right.
hope in some way that this little resource connects someone to that because it's been a huge game changer in me having something tangible for me to work on in conjunction with my own body and heart rather than just trying to sit in meditation, hope for the best, calm my mind to the best of my ability, and yet not break through to this new level of appreciation for all aspects of myself.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So that talks a lot about sort of the same concepts what you offered to your client that Neville Goddard offered with his law of assumption, which is, taught differently than the law of attraction, even though the law of assumption uses the law of attraction because it actually has you feel into who you would be with your imagination. So you're not just trying to think your way there, you're feeling your way there. You're really sort of imagining that you're already that being, like what you did with your client. And I'm curious, with the Dr. Joe Dispenza, is that information that's available in his Becoming Supernatural book as well?
I don't remember reading it there. I actually have the book in the other room, but I do know that he includes it in his workshops, and
Sure.
he has been on the board of the Heart Math Institute as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, I think I'd seen that as well, and I saw him with Bruce Lipton and a bunch of other guys that are all really focused on that sort of coherence. And it came up the other day, by the way, in a channeling
Yes.
session. Someone asked about that, so it's super interesting that it's like things come up and then they fade out again, and then they come up again for me. So I'm going to look into that as well personally on a personal level. Um, yeah, so that's really all beautiful, but you didn't address the other part of the question, which is how do people get out of this fear of feeling, this fear of sensing? Okay, so there's like emotional feeling, which we're all terrified of, which is why we avoid it
Mhm.
so craftfully, and we're so skilled and creative at finding ways to get out of our emotions. But there's also a deep fear of sensing pleasure in the body. I mean, you see it all the time. How many adults do you know who go into like fits of laughter the way children do? And that's a learned, like, I better not laugh too much. I better not be too joyous. I better not feel too much. I better not really get into this ice cream I'm eating, you know? And then that also trickles onto, of course, sexuality and that whole topic. So we've got a lot of work to do in general, all of us, not just in reconnecting with our heart, but reconnecting with the beautiful parts of our body. And what I've also been learning and leaning into, and also Vagrein has been sharing a lot, is that for as much as suffering gets trapped in the body, and like we can claim that that's trauma because we haven't processed emotions, and then there's physical pain that comes with that, pleasure does the same thing. And so I know there's a lot of people who use pleasure practices as manifestation tools, as ways of releasing things that have happened in the past. So can you share a bit on that?
Yeah. Okay. Could you ask the question one more time for me so I don't go off on a tangent?
Yes. First,
Specifically.
talk about clearing shame.
Ooh, okay. Oh my gosh. So clearing shame, I have two equally held points of view here. So I am a either lean into what you fear, or lean back and relax and see if it passes. So I think about it as like the infinity symbol, right? You either lean in or you lean back. And if you have been trying one method from reactivity and that's not been working, try the other. So I can't diagnose or tell anyone specifically what works best for them, because I go both ways in one day. I might go, oh my gosh, and I'm avoiding something and I call it relaxing or surrendering. And I'm just in pure avoidance of it. Or I'm like, oh, there's something instigating this fire. And I'm going, okay, I'm like ready to fight. I got like my sword out and I'm like, I need a challenge to feel alive. So on this topic of like releasing shame, I gotta say, like my most precise answer would be, what is it to you that is on the other end of the spectrum of shame? So typically, I want to ask you, what would you say is on the other end of the spectrum of shame for you emotionally?
It would be beyond self-acceptance, celebration. I'd say celebration is the opposite of shame.
I love that. Okay. That is a great one, because I have also found myself avoiding celebration for no reason. So I'm just going to use your example where if we find shame coming up, like if we have reoccurring negative thoughts about maybe our job or our career, that's something that I've been aware of more for myself. It's like, what? I'm a heckler of my own like chosen profession almost daily? What? So what I have done for a few years is, whenever I'm inspired, I will find a song. I'll find a song that brings up the most like joy for no reason. Like when I hear this song, it just makes me feel like dancing for no reason. The song is dancing. So pick a song that you can't help but feel that like jubilation inside of your body. And all you need to do for the day, your task is to take this 2 or 3 minute song and go somewhere where no one will see you, preferably outside barefoot in the sun if you can. And you dance your heart out in celebration for nothing else but for the pure fact that you exist, just because you can move. So this is something that people talk about a lot, which is like, okay, just do a little dance party. But there's so many things happening in you only giving yourself this little bitty window of your day where you celebrate full out for no reason that you usually just reserve for, I won the lottery, or or like, I just met the love of my life and I'm in euphoria right now. So if we start to microdose these moments of like ecstasy and pleasure throughout our day, it doesn't even have to be every day, but that's the goal. We'll start to show ourselves like we don't have to reserve that for a special occasion. And it also starts to alleviate how fixed those moments of shame are. Because as you know, some people might call this getting into a high frequency state. And you are actually purging your body or flushing your body with all of these feel good chemicals.
Mm-hmm.
And your brain doesn't know the difference, again, between a made up scenario and like it just doesn't have to have a reason why. It just knows, oh, I'm dancing and there's positive emotions. I'm going to release these feel good chemicals that also boost your immune function.
Sure.
So there's a million different reasons why this would work well, but in a sense, this is also an alchemy process. And it's probably the one I feel like I or most people have the least resistance to because it seems very innocent. It seems like it doesn't take that much of, forcing yourself to do. But in my experience, I recently understood like, wow, I fell back into that trap of, oh, I need to have a reason to dance. I need to feel like dancing before I practice
Mm-hmm.
happiness like I would practice yoga.
Okay. Okay. So it's a practice that you have to take on. You have to decide you want to be happy and then go ahead and like train your body, train your mind, train your brain to release those chemicals for nothing, basically, is what you're saying. So we look for excuses to be happy. And that's when those chemicals get released because that's what they're accustomed to. But it's again, it's like rewiring your brain, rewiring the neural pathways so that, if you see a flower, you're flooded with those chemicals. If you see, whatever it is, if someone like is polite to you in traffic, you're flooded with those chemicals. So that's really a wonderful way to make that a commitment as well. We are very good. Our brains are great computers. They're really, really good at helping us when we have intention to succeed at our intentions. That's what they're here for. That's why we love them so much for all the complications that they cause. But we can also train them to work in the way that we want them to. And your body is one of those tools that will, aid in training. And, Tony Robbins talks a lot about this with posture. Tony Robbins is always saying like, train your body to create the posture of a confident person, train your body to create the posture of a happy person. And honestly, it works. You can play with this as much as you want and it becomes a habit. It becomes a habit. We're trying to, who is it Dr. Joe Dispenza, break the habit of being yourself? Is that it? Is that
Yeah,
his
it
book?
is. Yeah. Breaking
Okay,
the habit
so
of being here. Yeah.
we're also wanting to create the habit of being ourselves, right? Of being our true selves, right? Because I also think that spirituality is now moving away from the idea of the ego is bad, the small self is bad. You have to, overcome the ego, overcome the small self. And we're moving more towards okay, great. We have all these tools and functionalities like the body, like the ego, like the mind, like all the parts that make us up that have different functions that no, they're not bad. They're perfect, but they might need direct intention to have them working in the way that is most functioning for us as a collective, and for us as, our own soul journey. And now we're coming to enough awareness of our souls to go, cool. Now I've got all this hardware and all this software and I can play with it and program it however the hell I want. And that's just so awesome. And it's so much more like compassionate and freeing to know that there's nothing wrong with the body, there's nothing wrong with the ego, there's nothing wrong with the mind, everything's okay where it is, and I have sovereignty to control or to modify or to create whatever I want in my life and in my own being. It's really wonderful. Yeah, I think pleasure is definitely one of these roots that once understood and accepted is a fast track to, it's like a cheat code. It's a cheat code to getting to where you really want to be, because the truth of the matter is that's where we really want to be. We want to be in pleasure and in ecstasy and in joy and in bliss. And yeah, your work is phenomenal for that. So you are a life coach. Is that what you would call yourself? Or do you have another term?
Yeah, well, I call myself a transformational coach because I focus on the change that people want to make.
Perfect. That's wonderful. So any kind of change, relationships, life, location, job, personal identity type of stuff. You cover it all.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I call myself a reality transformation coach because
Beautiful.
it the what I share does change how you see reality, which opens up this whole new world of what's available.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. And where can people find you right now? Or actually, first, before that, what's most alive for you right now? What kind of projects are you working on?
Oh my gosh. So actually, I just started this 30-day challenge called the Garbage Post Challenge. And probably by the time that this is launched, it's going to be all the way through and done.
Yeah.
But I'm continually offering these challenges of different types of different lengths. So if you want to connect with me, I'm probably going to do a challenge sooner or later after you read or after you listen to this. So find me on Instagram because I'll be posting about it there. And I also have a Telegram community if you want to join that as well, free for my community.
Wonderful. So your Instagram handle is?
My Instagram handle is my name, Karissa space Wieskamp,
What
or
does what does mystic, the word mystic, mean to you? Who's a mystic?
mm, what's a mystic? So actually, this recently came to me like as an archetype. So I think of, of course, there is, I get a picture of it. It's like there's a staff and there's robes. Mystic for me is this overall encompassing term of someone who is a visionary, who is a seer, who can see beyond the physical realm many different levels, many different layers. So a mystic to me is someone who can see supernaturally.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And I think we're all mystics in many different ways, or coming into it at least, or coming into recognition that we are, at least were, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And what else do you have to share with us right now? I want to know a little bit more of what direction, what would you want to share with like a large group of people? What's the most important thing right now for you, for the collective?
Ooh. Ooh, all right. So since I know that you like Avatar, I know that you use their filters on Instagram, which I love.
Oh, it's just fun.
I yeah, oh yeah, it's so much fun. So I just started watching the second Avatar, and I'm halfway through it. But so funny, what's been coming up for me lately has just been how the most important thing in my life and in my clients' lives is really just understanding if we could zero in on like that point of our hero's journey that is the hardest, that we create so much resistance about, and really we slow down like momentum and we get kind of stuck in the swamps, right? And we're just like, I keep swimming through these swamps and it sucks here. What I found for myself really boils down to when I am faced with something that feels like a challenge. If I can acknowledge, this is this is what a challenge is. Oh my goodness, I haven't ever faced this before. This is new. If I can first acknowledge, okay, this is a challenge, then I can choose to embrace it rather than ignore it or avoid it, because we've only got two options when our challenges come. We can either embrace it or we can ignore it and avoid it. So if we ignore it and avoid it, we basically keep on going until there's a catalyst where we're at the valley point, and it's really only up from there. So what I encourage people to do if they want to have a life of flow and ease and harmony and gracefulness is they give themselves the tool of understanding that if you embrace whatever shows up, if you embrace, accept, welcome it with open arms, then you're not at odds with yourself. You're no longer warring against yourself. And then whatever needs to stick around sticks around. And whatever is actually just like, oh no, never mind, I'm good. You just needed to see me. Bye. It moves on.
Yeah.
And I found for myself that if I could just keep this at the forefront, then I can take on the role as the main character, as the hero. And instead of running away from the dragon, that's always going to be there before whatever my end result might be, if I instead befriend the dragon and I learn how to ride the dragon everything else in the rest of the journey is going to be so much easier. My entire experience is going to be elevated because I learned how to tame the dragon. Because the dragon is there to serve us. But typically we're like, ooh, I'm either going to run away or I'm going to fight against it and just keep warring.
Absolutely.
And both of those are, you know, a loss of energy, basically. It's a way of sort of disowning our energy and having fragmented energy. And so every single time I'm like, okay, hold on. I can acknowledge this. I unify myself. I come back into like my own stability and I go, oh yeah, I have the capacity to face this. And it gamifies. It actually gets me excited about what comes next.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Well, what you've just described is exactly the way I dealt with my cancer experience, because there's no getting away from that dragon, like that metaphor of that dragon. There's no getting away from it, right? What is showing up for you, no matter whether or not you have a belief about it or not, it's for you. So my cancer was for me. It was for me to experience. It was for me to figure out. It was for me to feel, right? It was everything in that experience was for me, right? And I've had experiences in my past that are way less sort of like collectively like an oh my God experience, right? Where I've suffered way more, right? Because in those moments I had resistance against the thing that was going on, you know, or I was like, this shouldn't be happening. Or I was, you know, oh, I'm going to fight this until the death or whatever. And I hadn't yet learned that, what you're talking about, how to ride what's coming up for you, right? And, you know, I have to say that when you figure that out, right, and when you do have to practice it, right, it's something that you do not, you know, not maybe with your first experience of something happening, you're like, okay, I'm an expert, I'm a master, right? But once your brain, again, back to brain neural pathways, gets used to seeing things as belonging to you, therefore a part of you, and therefore for you as opposed to against you, you don't have the same experiences anymore. You don't have, it's not like the thing doesn't come up. It's not like, oh, your life is suddenly a miracle that like everything's perfect and everything's like in place all the time. No, but you don't have the same suffering or negativity or pain that you in theory would have. And then people look at you and you're like, why didn't that person react to that stimulus that everybody else would react to? And you're like, I forgot how to do that. I forgot how to be upset about something. And I forgot how not to use my catalysts or catapults as an opportunity. I don't know how to get swept away from this thing anymore. So I really love that you shared that, because you explained it far, you know, more gracefully than I can. And with the right metaphors for people to be able to lean into, hey, baby, maybe I don't need to fight, and maybe I don't need to run away. Maybe there's a third option, you know, it's not fight or flight anymore when your nervous system is like, cool, what are we dealing with today? So that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful. I want to thank you so much for coming on. This has been such a lovely conversation. I think people are going to love it. I think people are going to love you. And I'm really honored to be able to share this with my community and with whoever is interested in these topics. I know that you are a very skilled coach and that have guided many people who are so grateful for your service. And therefore, I'm grateful for your service, because anyone who is uplifting anyone is making the world a better place. So I thank you for being here and being in service, and for coming on the show.
Yeah. Thank you so much for what you're doing and for sharing this as well.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Some Kind of Mystic podcast. If you're hearing this message, you've listened all the way to the end of this episode, and for that, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. It's people just like you that keep me motivated to bring you more and more enlightened content to the world. Everyone is so busy these days with so many things competing for our attention. This is why I've put together a free time and focus management workshop that you can join on October 30th, right in the link in the show notes. I would love to see you there and can't wait to share all of my tips and tricks and life hacks for managing your time and your focus so that not only do you get the things that you want to do done, but you're living in a flow state. See you then.
So I was on a show that was picked up by Netflix, and this sort of happened in the middle of 2020 when everything was locked down. I was in England, and I got this random message from someone, and at first I was contemplating if it was a scam, and I was like, can you send me some proof, like your website? And this person apparently had found me on some sort of American expat Facebook group, and was like, hey, we would love to have you apply to come on this dating show. And I thought this was ridiculous, but also it made sense. So I was like, this actually seems like something that would come into my life, even though it's ridiculous. Let's give it a go. Like, what's the worst that can happen on this call? So I go ahead and I do these interviews. I end up being selected. And at this point, I did not know this was going to be a Netflix show. I just thought, oh, it's Lion TV. Who knows who they are? They're a company in England, whatever. And I just was excited because they were telling me like, oh, you're going to get paid this much and we're going to fly you out to London and you're going to be here for this time, blah, blah, blah. And so time comes and I haven't prepared at all because I thought this was a reality show. As far as I knew, like this was a reality show. So I don't hire anyone to help me or coach me. Like I'm just winging it. I haven't done any YouTube like preparation of like how to, be a certain way on TV. I'm a total newbie, right? So I get out there and we're in this giant castle and it is absolutely luxurious. And at this point I had been in isolation for maybe like 3 or 5 days in the middle of a city. And I made sure they gave me sort of like this penthouse suite so I could have a balcony so I could get my fresh air. So like I was able to pull some strings here, but I was also just feeling so frazzled from being locked up in the city before. And so unfortunately, I also started my bleed right when they started shooting. So I come on to the camera and I have no clue what I'm doing. I'm just like, all right, be honest. That's what matters. Be honest. And unfortunately, how that comes across on film is just someone who is super serious and super solemn. And I go back and I watch myself. I'm like, that poor thing. Like, it almost seems like she's like jittering like a chihuahua because it was so cold in there because they had all the doors open. They had all the doors open to this castle and it was like winter time in England. So I didn't have any like coat on. I was so cold. And the one little piece of this is that this particular show wasn't a normal dating show. They had you in full makeup because we were to look like a beast. Like we were made to look like a beast so we could have a reveal afterward of what we really looked like. So we had, like 3-ish hours, 4 hours of makeup and prosthetics on our faces. And fortunately for me, I got the one that you could actually breathe through and no one else really could breathe through their mask. So I got the one with a big old nose with big, nose holes so I could breathe because I was allergic to latex. And they're like, that's going to be a problem. So they gave me a way to breathe. And so while I was on the show, I was just trying my hardest not to visibly shiver. And I was like, okay, but the most important thing is that you're honest, Karissa. So I definitely might have been like the most, honest person on the show, but I definitely did not get selected as the winner of that episode because they caught me off of there real fast. I did not have any personality at all.
Oh my gosh. I actually caught your show a couple weeks ago. And only with you had mentioned this to me at the time you were shooting, I believe, not or before or something like that. Like, oh, I'm gonna be on the show and there's gonna be fake makeup or something like that. That's all you told me back then. And then when I was flipping through Netflix, I was like, I bet this is the show. So I went and I was like looking up which episode to watch, because I'm not really that interested in watching the whole series. But it was hilarious. I found you right away. Also because I know your shirt.
Yes, my favorite shirt. Yes.
Exactly. We're wearing that. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think if I can, I'll try and put a little clip of your reveal in there because you did look gorgeous.
Yes.
And yeah. So thanks so much for recording this with me again.
Thank you, Jessie.
You're adorable.